You know, for many years, Steve Qirs was a Democratic Party mega donor. He says he's given more than $20 million to help elect Democrats, and now he might just be jumping ship. Steve Qirs is an entrepreneur, self-made success story, and joins us now to explain his reasoning. Steve, when did the Democratic Party start going south with you?
Well, when they violated my trust, Brian. You know, they told the agencies, the FDA, the CDC, the NIH, said that these vaccines were safe and effective. And when I started seeing my friends die and be injured, and I started looking at the data, there was no question that this vaccine is the most dangerous vaccine ever created by man. It is 1,000 times more deadly than the smallpox vaccine, and that's too unsafe for people to use. And I could not get even a single minute in front of any Democratic congressman. The best I got was that Ro Khanna gave me to a staff member who took 2 months to get back to me. And when I asked if she had read what I had sent her, she said, no, it disagreed with the CDC, so it's not right, and so I didn't really read it. So that's as far as I ever got.
But you didn't stop there. You did your own research. What did you find? What did you find was effective, and what was the reaction when you put it out there?
Well, what I found was that hundreds of thousands of Americans have been killed by this vaccine, and millions have been injured. And, you know, clearly you are more likely to be injured or dead from the vaccine than if you were unvaccinated. So what they're saying and what the reality is completely opposite.
But in turn, the Democrats who you funded exceedingly won't even return your call, including your own congresswoman. But you said you really believe Senator Ron Johnson. That's somebody you fully support, who's in a real fight to get 6 more years in Wisconsin. What about Ron Johnson?
Yeah, Ron Johnson is the only person in Congress who cares at all about the millions of people who are vaccine injured. And my estimates are that there are tens of millions of vaccine injured in America. And members of Congress will meet with these people, but they meet with them, and 30 minutes later they say, oh, you know, they'll look at their watch and say, gotta go, and that's the end of it. Whereas Ron Johnson has been just very consistent about bringing this problem to the attention of the American public.
Steve, his figures, because
he's awesome.
He's a very successful businessman like you. Steve, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
I'm Steve Qirs. I'm Executive Director of the COVID-19 Early Treatment Fund. I have no conflicts. Advance to slide number 4 with the elephant. I'm going to focus my remarks today on the elephant in the room that nobody likes to talk about, that the vaccines kill more people than they save. Today we focus almost exclusively on COVID death saves and vaccine efficacy because we were led to believe that the vaccines are perfectly safe. But this is simply not true. For example, there were 4 times as many heart attacks in the treatment group in the Pfizer 6-month trial report. That wasn't bad luck. Theirs shows heart attacks happen 71 times more often following these vaccines compared to any other vaccine. In all, 20 people died who got the drug, 14 died who got the placebo. Few people notice that. If the net all-cause mortality from the vaccines is negative, vaccines, boosters, and mandates are all nonsensical. This is the case today. Even if the vaccines had 100% protection, it still means we kill 2 people to save 1 life. 4 experts did analyses using completely different non-U.S. data sources, and all of them came up with approximately the same number of excess vaccine-related deaths, about 411 deaths per million doses. That translates into 150,000 people have died. Next slide would be slide number 11, the nursing home. Now, the real numbers confirm that we kill more than we save. And I would love everyone to look at the Israel Ministry of Health data on the 90-plus-year-olds, where we went from a 94.4% vaccinated group to 82.9% vaccinated in the last 4 months. In the most optimistic scenario, it means that 50% of the vaccinated people died and 0% of unvaccinated people died. Unless you can explain that to the American public, you cannot approve the boosters. Slide number 16, please, myocarditis. The paper just posted yesterday on medRxiv entitled mRNA COVID-19 Vaccination and Development of CMR Confirmed Myopericarditis shows that the myopericarditis risk was 1 in 1,000, and that's an overall age range from 18 to 65, mean age of 33. It is not inconsistent with what the VAERS shows. Next slide would be slide number 18, gaming of the trial. It's pretty clear that the Pfizer trial results were gamed. It's statistically impossible for protocol violations to be 5 times higher in the treatment group. Why hasn't this been investigated? Slide number 19. Maddie DeGray was 12 when she enrolled in the Pfizer phase 3 trial for kids. Now she's paralyzed for life. It wasn't reported in the Pfizer results. I told Janet Woodcock there was no investigation. Please tell us why this fraud was not investigated. And finally, slide number 20, please. Early treatments are a much better alternative to boosters. The proof is that in Israel, cases are at an all-time high. In India, Uttar Pradesh is now COVID-19 free as of today. Almost nobody there is vaccinated. Thank you.
Okay.
You should always be suspicious if the people in charge of safety don't want to see the safety data. That should be a red flag. I couldn't understand why people aren't looking at this data. Even the clinical trial for the Pfizer vaccine showed that the vaccine killed more people than the placebo group. It's supposed to be the other way around.
So, what's your name?
My name is Steve Kirsch.
Steve Kirsch?
Yes.
Okay. Where do you work? What do you work for?
I'm a journalist for Substack.
Substack?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have about close to 1 million followers on Substack. So I've been called an anti-vaxxer. I've been called a misinformation spreader. MIT has labeled me a misinformation super spreader. And in fact, if you go Google, you type in misinformation super spreader, I'm the top hit in the entire world. Why am I labeled a misinformation super spreader? I have no history at all of being a conspiracy theorist. How do I go from being, hey, you should get vaccinated, waving the flag to I love Tony Fauci, to saying, oh, wow, we've been lied to? How did that happen? I was vaccinated in March of 2021. My wife was vaccinated, and all my kids were vaccinated. So you couldn't call me an anti-vaxxer. I've always gotten all these vaccines that the government has recommended. I've always trusted the government. And then I started hearing stories from my friends. So one person said that she asked me if the vaccines were safe, and I said, of course they're safe. And I said, why are you asking me this question? I mean, like, have you not turned on the news? Like, where have you been? She said, well, 3 of my relatives were vaccinated and they died a week later, and they were all perfectly healthy before they got the vaccine. And I said, well, that's impossible. That must be wrong. And then she replied, yeah, but they're dead.
Is it really safe, and is it really effective?
These vaccines are safe. They are incredibly effective.
Vaccines are safe and effective.
Getting a booster different from your original vaccination is likely safe and effective.
But if there's one message that needs to cut through all this, the vaccines are safe. I promise you, they are safe and effective.
Researchers have confirmed that the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID vaccine is safe and effective.
Surprisingly, most people don't want to know what's in the vaccines. In fact, nobody wants to know what's in the vaccines because nobody in Congress is asking to analyze the vials. Nobody in the mainstream media has ever asked what's in the vials. And the public doesn't want to know either because the public's not asking what's in these vaccines. If people understood what was in the vaccine, they'd go apeshit.
You know, Steve Kirsch, by the way, has a great offer out there for your listeners. I don't know if you know about this.
No.
His offer is anybody
from any major academic medical center or any government agency who will come to the table and have a fair discussion on vaccine safety and efficacy, he'll pay him $2 million.
Anybody? I offered $1 million, not to win the debate, just to come to the table. $1 million. And when they refused the $1 million, I said, okay, name your price. Is $5 million? $10 million? $100 million? What will it take for us to have a civil discussion on recorded, where we can go through the evidence in the VAERS system and other pieces of data so that we can have an open discussion about this? Now, we all know in the Pfizer trial that was published in the medical literature that more people died who got the vaccine than who got the placebo. In other words, the vaccine killed more people than the placebo did. Now, it's not supposed to work that way for a vaccine, right? Vaccines are supposed to save lives. But in fact, in the clinical trial, more people died who got the drug than who didn't get the drug. And the reason is because that the clinical trial showed that you could save one life for every 22,000 people who got the drug from COVID. However, more people died who got the drug because they died from different reasons. They died from the vaccine. But see, everybody is focused on how many lives we can save from COVID, and they're not focused on how many deaths were caused by the vaccine. So I did a calculation. Well, it turns out that when you save one person for every 22,000 people you inject, it means we could have saved, that the vaccines have saved 10,000 lives over the course of a year. 10,000 lives. Now, 3 million people die every year. You just saved 10,000 lives. Congratulations. That's rounding error. We turned this country upside down to save just 10,000 lives. But we actually didn't save 10,000 lives. Because when you look at the VAERS numbers, and you look at it 12 different ways that didn't even use VAERS, you come up with at least 150,000 people who have been killed by the vaccine. There's no other explanation. So you killed 150,000 in order to maybe save 10,000 lives. And that's if the actual variant matched the vaccine, which it doesn't. So in other words, and for kids, by the way, the risk-benefit is even worse. We kill 117 kids to save one life. Because everybody is focused, laser focused on how many lives can we save from COVID. And they're not focused on how many people actually die from the vaccine. Because it's all covered up, because the doctors aren't allowed to talk about it, because they will lose their license or they will be fired if they talk about it. So the VAERS is a voluntary reporting system, and it was created this way because the drug companies negotiated with the government to say, the government said, we will give you liability protection for your vaccines. But the quid pro quo is that we're going to establish this vaccine adverse event reporting system, which of course they could have done anyway. We have a VAERS system in the United States. The system in Israel was even worse. In March, these researchers came to the Israeli Ministry of Health and said, hey, we got a problem here. Basically, they're told that the vaccines are killing and hurting people, and you're withholding that information from the Israeli people.
So the latest Israeli vaccination studies are out, and Steve Qirs says the results prove that the government was lying all along about the frequency of adverse events from COVID shots. Shocker.
I sent an email to over 200, close to 300 people at the CDC asking if any of them wanted to see the data.
Okay.
Almost 300 people. Not a single person wanted to see the data at the CDC. Stu, I have the personal cell phone for Grace Lee, who is the chair of the ACIP committee, which is the outside committee of the CDC. I asked if she wanted to see the data. She ignored me.
Did they explicitly tell you no, or did they just ignore you?
No, they just ignore me. That committee is responsible for approving and being the outside independent source for approving these vaccines.
How did ACIP recently come to the decision to recommend COVID-19 shots for this latest group of young kids? And what kinds of things were you looking for?
But now it's very clear that she's actively avoiding the question of whether she wants to see the Israeli data that shows the vaccines are not safe. That's pretty serious.
Okay, well, it seems like she's not interested, so...
How in the world could anyone, especially the top person in the world responsible for safety, not want to see the safety data that shows that the vaccines are not safe? They don't want to be confronted with even the question, do you want to see the data? They want to have plausible deniability. There are about 14,000 Americans who have reported deaths. Now, that's probably underreported by a factor of 100. So you take the 14,000 deaths that are reported in the VAERS system, you multiply it by 100, you get 1.4 million. But the deaths that happened 5 months later, and that's the bulk of it, are not going to get reported in the VAERS system.
Medical freedom has been hijacked by hospitals, by insurance companies, by the government, and by big pharma. Doctors, now is the time to stand up and save our profession. Patients, ask yourselves, do you want doctors that respect your right to informed consent and do you want doctors that will respect your right to decide what gets injected into your body? Or do you want doctors that follow the dictates of third parties, like the government, like insurance companies, like hospitals? No way. Media censorship, the bullying of physicians like myself who question the narrative, and the unwillingness of hospitals, the CDC, to give us very important information about COVID has bred extreme mistrust amongst the public. And now is the time to stand up. People, stand up. Stand up for yourselves. Don't be bullied by these people. Don't let other people decide what goes in your body, and certainly don't let other people decide what goes in your children's bodies.
We are fighting a war. It's a war on our health. It's a war that's been going on for decades, and it's waged by the pharmaceutical industry. They have always put profits before patients. That toll has been heavy over the decades. It is now a crime against humanity. That war that myself and my colleagues and my organization, the Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, we've been fighting that war. We're fighting for ourselves, our patients, and all of you. We are fighting against Big Pharma. They have controlled and captured our health agencies. Every single policy that they have issued out of those agencies the entire pandemic was written by the pharmaceutical industry. And that is a war on repurposed drugs. We've known now for 2 years that there are cheap, safe, highly effective, and widely available medicines that can treat this disease. That information has been suppressed. We are in a war of information. People are dying. They are killing us with censorship and propaganda. They are manipulating the minds of millions. Most of the healthcare system, many of my fellow physicians are completely brainwashed into believing that there is no treatment. They tell us to vaccinate ourselves endlessly and boost ourselves, even though that single strategy has failed, is failing, and will continue to fail. It must stop.